Hello, and welcome to Depth Insights, where we take a depth psychological look at news, topics, and events that are going on in your world today. I'm your host, Bonnie Bright, and I'm also the founder of Depth Psychology Alliance, which is an online academic community for everyone who's interested and also active in the field of depth and Jungian psychologies. But depth psychology is for everyone, so I hope that you'll join us and come check out the website at depthinsights.com, as well as the online community at www.depthpsychologyalliance.com. My guest today is Kathleen Burt, and I'm really excited about this particular program because Kathleen is an astrologer, and she has been doing this for a long time, and she has a lot of information that she's going to be sharing with all of us on Depth Psychology Alliance in a very special online study group that will be taking place in February. So starting February 1st, we'll be doing this special online study group with the text that Kathleen has written, and we're going to hear more about that. But meanwhile, let me just welcome Kathleen to the show. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
It's
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. One thing that is really, I think, quite significant about Kathleen is that she has been a Fulbright scholar to India. And Kathleen, you finished your graduate work in South Asian history.
South Asian Studies at the University of Chicago. That was a long time ago.
I hope we'll be hearing a little bit about your time in India. I know just from what I've learned from you that certainly has had an impact on where your life went from there. But the main thing that I really want to talk about is your books, and particularly your experience that has led up to you really being where you are today as an author and as an astrologer. So maybe you can start us off by talking about how it all began for you and what led you down this path. And then we're going to talk about Beyond the Mask, of course, which is the text for the study group in February.
All right. I became really interested in astrology in India. Before I went to India, I was a skeptic. I had read those little entertainment column transits in the newspaper, and that's about my understanding of astrology at the time. But in India, it was so important in every area of life, from the Brahmin priests comparing charts to really find out if people were compatible to be married, and eclipses, and not moving your furniture on Mars Day because your dishes would be broken. This was mind-boggling to me. And so I had to really look at it to see, why. For one thing, it was left out of my graduate program, how important this was on the culture, and also that, I would need to be teaching India when I returned, so I would need to understand this. And from there, I began to understand the whole philosophy of astrology and my own horoscope better.
That's so fascinating. I love that example about not moving your dishes on Mars Day, because so many of us, we don't pay attention to that, and it's such an archetypal thing. I think that's the way that I'm able to understand it and look at it. When you understand the archetype of what Mars is, and I'm sure you can talk in more detail about that, but most of us probably have a general understanding that it's a very fiery kind of warlike presence. And so, yes, the idea of moving dishes around that kind of energy or archetypal patterning is probably not a very good idea.
They really believed that they would all be dropped, by the movers. And I thought, my goodness. And I also liked the idea that they prayed and fasted on eclipses. It was a whole different cultural understanding of
wow.
that came through astrology.
Yeah, regardless of what you believe, and again, I'm saying this, I think I probably have been in the same place that you alluded to as a skeptic at one point in my life. I'm certainly more and more of a believer every single day these days. But I think just the fact that you would pay attention to these kinds of things is really important. And so certainly, for that reason, I think astrology is a very powerful system, because it empowers you by helping you or enabling you to pay attention to what's going on around you.
And the symbolism is very interesting for using dream work and active imagination and many things that Jungians are also interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that leads us to the next question then, and you can, I guess, take this in whichever order works for you, but I know that you were part of a group that was primarily Jungian, and that led to, or was the catalyst that actually allowed you to finally write the book.
Yes, actually, that was my first book, Archetypes of the Zodiac, that came from me being exposed to all the wonderful people who taught patterns in health in the San Diego area. But I had been at that point in my own life moving from being single for 35 years to my first marriage when I read Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, and trying to sort out who the I would be now that there was a we, now that I had gotten married. And I had, for instance, received a call from a friend, and she said, hop on the airplane, I'll meet you at Esalen for the weekend. There's a fabulous program. And I thought, I'll do that. And I had my suitcase half-packed when I remembered I have a husband now. I should mention to him being gone and all of this. Maybe he had plans for the weekend. So I was sorting this all through when I found Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, and thinking about the I and the we and personal experience and how it changed. And I sat up in this big armchair, and I read the entire book one night, and then the next day, a friend of mine said, have you heard about Patterns in Health? They're taking 12 participants from different healing fields, and they don't have an astrologer or anybody from a psychic background. And I said, well, maybe I could be the person. So, of course, I immediately signed up for that. It's just like synchronicity takes over at some points in our lives.
Yeah, it definitely does, and I have a feeling that that's exactly what was at play, it sounds like. So were you familiar with Jung's work? You mentioned his biography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Were you familiar with his work before that?
No, not until I took Patterns in Health, and the instructors, for a period of 2 years, we met every week, and they each took a different part of it. We had everything from sand play to the archetypes to dreams to active imagination and ritual. So that's how I went about learning. We read through certain passages of the collected works, and it had a tremendous impact on my own life, and then also my first book, as I mentioned, Archetypes of the Zodiac, emerged from that. And shortly thereafter, I was invited to participate by friends of Jung in a mask-making event. And that is where I really felt I would do another book on, this time not the sun signs, the sun being the ego and the ambition and so on, but the mask, the persona, the rising sign, because it was so graphic in the course of the mask-making event how important this was. And of course it took me 20 years, but eventually the timing was right, and I wrote Beyond the Mask, and that's the book that we are going to be working with in the online seminar.
That's a lovely way to describe it. You know, I had never heard it's a pretty basic way to describe it, but I had never heard it described before you said that, about how the sun sign is really about the ego and then the rising sign is really about the persona. So I think what you mean by that is that the persona is really kind of the face that we put to the world. Is that true?
Exactly. And in actually doing that with making a mask in the workshop, if you can visualize putting it on, taking it off, I had a sense of how the rising sign worked over time. We are born with one rising sign, and then, every 30 years approximately, we put on another one, and we reinvent ourselves, either consciously or unconsciously, according to what the new persona, the new rising sign, brings out our gifts, our talents that are there in potential in the natal chart.
Wow. Well, that's remarkable, because one can really imagine the extent that it could be valuable to know what your rising sign is, first of all, and also to know what the associated traits and gifts and qualities are that go along with that.
Right. The sun, of course, is a star, and we all want to be a star, I mean symbolically, but the rising sign is bigger than that in scope. It's like a whole constellation of possibilities that the mask represents, that we kind of grow into over these longer 30-year cycles. The other thing is that the energy of the ego, of the sun sign, for people who are conscious and, well, working on themselves or mature as they grow older, that wanes. The ego's ambitions wane, and we make peace with our desires or the ones we haven't fulfilled, or we're kind of tired of the ones that we have fulfilled, some of those directions by around the late 40s, early 50s. And so what the new cycle, the new progressed mask enables everyone to do is move past that and find a new way of being and a new way of working with different planets in the natal chart than the planets that were brought out compatible with the rising sign we were born with. So we still have the rising sign we were born with, but people who meet us 30 years later may pick up a sense of the progressed rising sign as well. And we may be interested in a different type of person because we have a new progressed rising sign.
Right. Wow. Well, so that brings me to, I just want to be sure that we mention the subtitle of your book. We've mentioned Beyond the Mask now a couple of times, and we're going to talk more about that since it is the text for the study group. But the subtitle, of course, is The Rising Sign and the Second Half of Life. And so I started to see here the correlation between, Jung talked about the second half of life. He was one of the first, I think, to introduce that idea, and I'm sure that's probably where you got it. You can confirm that. But certainly we understand, at least in the field of depth and Jungian psychology, that, yeah, you're right, the ego does start to kind of take a back seat as we begin to hit, Jung said, around our late 30s, and of course that age might vary, but the idea that we really undergo quite a radical transformation as the individuation process starts to rev up and kick in. And so I'd love to just hear more about the book itself and your ideas about that second half of life. And then if you'd like, you can just go into some detail about what you expect that we will be covering in the special online study group.
Yes, I want first of all to say that other astrologers told me as I was writing it, it would help if you gave a little bit of information about, say, the first half of life so that people could understand their natal rising sign and see where they started and then where they're going after 50. So the book, I believe, as it turned out, with a lot of help from suggestions from my friends, will benefit people who are younger, who wish to understand the first half of life, or who wish to perhaps relate to their younger clients, even though they're more interested in using it as a blueprint for the second half of life, older astrologers or older psychologists. So the people who are younger would benefit. They would also maybe understand what their parents are going through or their older relatives as well. So there is a little section on early life in there and then how it changes. So I did want to say that. But on the whole, I think that the benefit I had from my colleagues as I was writing it too is they said you are filling a gap in the literature of astrology, which I didn't realize at all at the time, because there's very little available for people who are 50 and older to read about the journey. And even in the newspaper, the little astrology section in the entertainment section tends to be more valid for people under 50 than for people older 50 who have different interests. But you ask about the online seminar. I am focusing on two sections in the book. One is the progressed cycles, which I've mentioned, that are important after 50. The other is an understanding of the planet that is the spiritual ruler and the planet that is the instinctual ruler of each of the rising signs. The issue as people get older is they're very interested in the spiritual ruler, and they can not be as interested in the instinctual ruler. And so what I hope the seminar will do is put all of that in balance through the little stories, the folk tales, because we really don't want to lose focus on, for instance, the planets like Hermes, who is the instinctive ruler of Gemini and the esoteric ruler of the spiritual ruler of Aries, because Hermes is our ability to adapt, to be wily, to take what the outer world tosses to us and sort of work around it, find a way to deal with that based upon our Hermes instincts. And so it really is going to bring out both of those rulers through the discussion questions, but mainly, I believe, through the stories, because the stories are what nourishes us. The stories really are food, and each individual would see something slightly different in it and hopefully be able to amplify their own work with clients or just their own work in their dreams and active imagination journals.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the stories. I just find that such a powerful teaching technique, and particularly in your book, the way you sprinkled them throughout each chapter to really be able to illustrate the concept is very powerful. And I know a lot of them actually talk about an older couple who is seeking a treasure, with a capital T. So how does the kind of treasure that they seek after midlife differ from the kind of treasure that the hero is seeking in youth? You've talked about this a little bit, but can you go into a little bit more detail about the stories and the treasure that they're seeking?
Yes, actually I hope to do more of that when I have more time to spend just on one story, and that would be through the teleseminar, where I'll be taking a larger legend, a longer, a more, I think, important legend than some of the little folk tales in the book, and going with more detail for perhaps an hour on it. But in general, if you would ask yourself, as I hope each participant will do with the treasure stories in the seminar, well, how did I feel about that when I was younger? What would have been my golden fleece? Where would my magic beans have taken me? What would my desire have been when I was younger? And at this point in my life, what would my desire be? So I haven't wanted so much to tell people what I thought as hopefully to generate a little bit of discussion on it.
Excellent. I think that's going to be a really remarkable event, and so I want to make sure that we just talk about that here, and then I'll mention it again at the end. That is that Kathleen will be offering a teleseminar that is open to anyone who would like to participate, and that will be on February 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that will be 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And that will be a 60-minute teleseminar where she will, as she just mentioned, go into more detail. Kathleen, we'll talk about that at the end. I'll just mention it again. But while we're in the process of this, for people who are thinking about joining the free online group on Depth Psychology Alliance, this study group will use the text. Just so that you know, we have set up a web page where you can get more details both about Kathleen, about the book. There is a link to order the book from that particular page. And there's also some of the talking points for the online study group, and then there's a button that you can push to go join the online group, which again is free. And you can find that web page at www.depthinsights.com/study group, and that's all one word and all lowercase. So at depthinsights.com/study group, all the information is there. You do need to join Depth Psychology Alliance if you are not a member already, but again, the community is free to join, and if you're not familiar with it as a listener, there is a lot of information on there that I think will be of great interest. The group is already starting to form, Kathleen. I noticed there's already several people who have signed up for that, so I'm really excited.
That's good news.
It is. It's going to be really an amazing event, I think. Is there more that you'd like to share with us about the book itself or about the power of the rising sign in your own life?
Well, in my life, I have noticed that progressing, because this is so recent, progressing 5 years ago, I began with the Gemini natal ascendant, progressed a long time through Cancer, and then progressing into Leo, that I found myself in a more extroverted place, and I was more comfortable doing things like this, for instance, or even some television shows, some cable shows, than I would have been in the long cycle progressing through Cancer, when I was happy more with one-on-one client work and maybe a small group of people that I knew. Now, with the Leo ascendant, it's more like, all right, I don't know them. They're coming through the internet. That's fine. So it's unique. You can go from an introverted to an extroverted phase is, I guess, the point I'm making on that.
Well, that's really encouraging, actually, to hear. Speaking as an introvert, I mean, some of us are struggling with that, and of course, I think many of us have the tendency to believe that if we are one way, we're so identified with the ego that we feel we are one way, we probably feel that we'll always be that way. So it's very encouraging to think that there are some things going on in the heavens and the patterns around us that actually can and will shift and change and probably open us up and enable us to transform in ways that we probably could never imagine before.
Yes, there's a whole constellation of new possibilities with a new progressed descendant.
Right. Yeah, I get that. You know, the other thing, too, is have you found in your studies when you first got introduced to Jung and started studying his work, were you aware of the fact that he also had an interest in astrology and had done some work on that?
Not in the beginning, but I was so amazed when I was taking the Patterns in Health series of seminars to read Ion and Mysterium, because it seemed to me that they were almost astrology books coming from my background when I would get to certain parts of it.
Yeah,
when he spoke about the age of Pisces and various things like that.
Absolutely. For those of you who are still skeptics out there, and I know there are many, it's always good to take things with a grain of salt, but I do remember Jung saying that he was likening astrology to vintage. I think, let's see, I have the quote here somewhere. He says, we're born at a given moment in a place, and like vintage years of wine, we have the qualities of the year and of the season in which we are born. Astrology does not lay claim to anything else. And I just love that because it's true. When you start to think about different growing seasons and different effects that the weather has and that nature has on things and patterns and the universe in general, you start to realize that there are things that influence us all the time. That's what the unconscious is, isn't it? And so if we're open to these things and we start paying attention to them, like through the study of astrology, then things definitely are able to be more accessible to us and we can begin to understand ourselves better.
Yes, I think that's all very true. And then often we get tired of old ways of being around 50, and then you can be open to new ways of reinventing yourself in the outer world, as well as making them it so that the mask that you wear in the outer world suits better the talents that you are working with in your own life at the time.
Uh-huh. Well, Kathleen, you also study and I believe you teach yoga as well, right? Is there a connection for you between astrology and yoga, or how did you come to that?
Well,
because that's
that again went back to India, the interest in yoga, just the way the interest in astrology came to me there, because I went as a skeptic with both. I went as a skeptic thinking, what are people doing getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going out to the beach and going through all these convoluted things, yoga poses? What is the benefit of that? But then I went. I got up at 5 when, of course, all of in Pondicherry, the church bells rang for the Catholics and then for the French, and then of course, the Muslim call to prayer, and then the Hindus began their particular ritual, so you couldn't sleep. There was so much going on. So I got up and I went to the beach, and I discovered something, especially that the poses that were twists, that were very deep twists, were like wringing out all the tension. And that was my very first experience of yoga, because then I could sit down in the guest house with the Europeans and people from various parts of India who were staying there, and they could say whatever they liked about the Vietnam War and what they thought of my country. And instead of getting angry, I could respond in a different kind of way as a result of beginning the day with all of those yoga twists. So that had a personal value to me, and I continued with it for all those years because of that.
These kinds of practices, yoga has been particularly important to me in especially my early process of discovering depth psychology and moving into a new and different place in my life that is far more spiritual and with more spaciousness and the capacity to observe those kinds of emotions that you were just mentioning.
Mm-hmm. The longer you do it and the more familiar you are with the poses, then the more you begin to see that it has an effect emotionally and spiritually. The first couple of years, people are just concerned with, have I got my feet and my arms in the right position, But after that, they begin to see the benefits on other levels.
I suspect that's very much the same in astrology as well.
It's true. It's really true.
Great. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for talking with me today. I know our time has gone fast. I just want to make sure that we put out all the information again. I just think this online study group is going to be really remarkable. Again, the online study group is free and open to the public. All you need to do is join Depth Psychology Alliance, and again, that's also a free access to that community, and it's quite a remarkable community. So to get more information about the study group, about Kathleen Burt, and about her book, Beyond the Mask, The Rising Sign in the Second Half of Life, you can go to www.depthinsights.com/study group, and that's all one word, lowercase, study group. So again, that's depthinsights.com/study group. All the information is there. There's a link where you can just click to go straight to Depth Psychology Alliance. Or if you prefer, just go to depthpsychologyalliance.com, and there will be a link on the homepage there as well that can take you to the groups section, and you'll find that under groups. So, Kathleen, you had mentioned that there is a United Astrology Conference.
Yes, it's coming up in May, and if you go to UAC, United Astrology Conference 2012 on Facebook, they will give you all of the information about it, some biographical information on the speakers, the dates, the registration forms, and what have you.
Great. And I assume that that's open to all levels of people who are just beginners.
Yes, there will be sun sign lectures for beginners. There will be research papers given by people who have been a long time involved with astrology. So many different things happening.
Wonderful. And then again, just a reminder for the teleseminar that Kathleen will be offering through Depth Psychology Alliance that will take place on February 29th, I think a very auspicious day as it's a leap year, and we're talking about astrology. That's kind of cool. And that will be at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Pacific Time, and we will provide more details about that on Depth Psychology Alliance as well as Depth Insights website as we come forward about how to join that. There will be a $10 charge for that, but I believe that will honestly be a wonderful opportunity for those of you who have heard Kathleen talk now and have enjoyed this discussion. That it's going to be much, much richer, particularly if you go through the month-long free online study group that she starts on February 1st. So come join the group. You can join anytime starting right now, and we'll be eagerly anticipating the start of that. And to learn more about Kathleen in general, you can also go to her website, which is windowtothestars.net. windowtothestars.net. Kathleen, thank you so much for being here with me. I've so enjoyed our conversation.
I did too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye.